Today on TOKKANTE, we need to start looking at my next watch. So it's been 4 months already and I'm getting a new job, so that means new watch, right? So let the hunt begin. So I'm gonna work for a tech startup and I'm gonna work from home, at least for the foreseeable future, which means it's gonna be casual pretty much all the time. So no more working in central, professional services, so I don't really need, the fancy dressy office watch anymore. I was considering for a while the previous generation Zenith Define Titanium, but not gonna need that now. So what other watches could I be considering? If you look at my collection, it's mostly, classic slash heritage slash, vintage inspired. So I thought this would be a good time for me to consider a modern tool watch. So first we look at the contenders, which watches I was considering and which ones I eliminated and why I ended up comparing the Sinn versus the Pelagos. And then after that, we'll do kind of a versus and I'll compare them over 12 different categories. And I have a clear winner for 10 of those categories. And I'm not quite sure for the last 2 remaining categories. Let's compare. So in terms of tool watch brands I've been considering, I'm thinking of Omega, Sinn or Tudor. So the first one I was looking at for a while is the Omega Seamaster 300M, but the 2254.50, the Peter Blake. I've never been a fan of the current 300M. I don't like the skeletonized hands, I don't really like the new wave dial, I don't like the shape of the helium escape valve, and I really don't like the James Bond bracelet that doesn't taper. So I think the best design Seamaster 300M for me is the Peter Blake, and that's the one I would be considering. But because of its age, it's almost a 25-year-old watch now, it's neo-vintage, I think it would be a bit fragile, and maybe that's not the best contender for a tool watch. So I'd love to have it in the collection, but maybe at some point later. Now the second brand I will be considering, of course, it's Sinn, especially their divers. So that means either the U50 or the U1, U2 or UX. So the U1, U2, UX, I've tried them many times, but they are very big. They're 44 mil, they're quite thick. They don't quite fit my wrist. I think the one that I would consider is the U50. It's smaller, it's slimmer, it fits perfectly. Now the third brand is Tudor. So Tudor, of course, I could be considering the Black Bay 58 or the Pelagos. Now if we're talking about tool watch, I have to consider the Pelagos. I think the Black Bay 58 is great, but it's more of a, stylish diver. This would be perfect as an office watch. But because of the polished flanks on the side and then the bracelet maybe that I don't really like, I think the Pelagos is a better tool watch also in technical terms. So that's the one I would be considering. And then 4, Omega again, but with the Planet Ocean in 39.5. So I love the Planet Ocean, but again, it's very big, except the 39.5 fits my wrist better, a bit chunky. But the problem with that one is that it's very blingy, it's very shiny because of the glossy ceramic dial and the rhodium-plated hands and the ceramic bezel. It's very blingy, and I don't think it really fits the bill as a tool watch. So in the end, I'm left with the Sinn U50 versus the Tudor Pelagos. And the LHD is my favorite version, so that's the one I'll be comparing. And I know some of you will say, well, you should be considering the Sinn U1 versus the Pelagos. But like I said, if I'm going to consider a Sinn, it's going to be the U50. And then for the Pelagos, there's no smaller version. The FXT, to me, doesn't fit the bill because there's no bracelet, so it has to be the Pelagos. So I haven't seen many videos comparing Sinn with the Tudor Pelagos, so that's why I wanted to do a comparison. So we'll go over 12 different categories, and then I have a winner for 10 of them. 2 of them, you can let me know in the comments what you think, and if you agree with my conclusions or not. So they are both divers, so first let's look at the obvious and look at the water resistance. So the Sinn U50 is a 500-meter water-resistant diver versus the LHD, which is also a 500-meter water-resistant, but it has an helium escape valve. And I know no one will ever need that, but in terms of engineering or technical achievement, I think it takes a little more to engineer a watch with a helium escape valve, especially one that is integrated to the case like the LHD. So for this category, even though it's really close and it doesn't make any practical difference, I will give the win to the Pelagos. Then let's look at the case. So the U50 is a 41 mil watch. It's 47 lug to lug, so it wears really well, and it's only 11.15 millimeter thin for a 500 meter water resistant watch. The Pelagos LHD, on the other hand, is a 42 mil watch. It's 50 lug to lug, which still wears well, and it's 14.3 millimeter thick. So it is quite chunky. To me, ideally, a watch should be under 11, preferably under 12. acceptable under 13, and then if you have a complication, a GMT or chronograph, maybe under 14. But to be, above 14, it has to have something special. So this one is a bit chunky. So for the case size, I'll give the win to the U50. Now let's look at the choices of metal construction. So the Sinn U50 is made of a German U-boat submarine steel. And basically that's a denser kind of steel than 316 or even 904L. It's more corrosion resistant than even 904L, and it has anti-magnetic properties, and it is more scratch resistant. So on top of that, Sinn has a process called tegmenting, which makes it even harder and even more scratch resistant. So this is really cool. I don't love the bit blasting finish. I've talked about this before, but it is a really cool construction. The LHD, on the other hand, is made of grade 2 titanium. So this is supposedly lighter. It has a very nice hue. I really like the color, especially on the LHD version. However, it will scratch really easily. Now, I've read in many places that it's easy to refinish a titanium grade 2 case, but honestly speaking, how often are you going to do that? I don't think you're going to refinish your watch every month, so it's going to show up scratches pretty easily. So for the metal construction, I'll give the win to Sinn as well. Now, since we just compared metal construction, let's look at the weight. And it's closer than you think. So the Sinn U50 sized for my wrist at 6.75 inches or 17 centimeters, it's 151 grams. The head itself is 74 grams. Now, the Pelagos LHD is made of titanium, which is lighter, much lighter. So you would expect it to be much lighter. However, on full bracelet, it's 157 grams, so it's actually heavier than the U50 size for my wrist, but that's with a full bracelet. So I'm expecting that, by removing a few links, because I don't have a very large wrist, I'm expecting it's probably going to be around maybe 145 or maybe 140 even. So I think the Pelagos LHD is going to end up being a lighter size for my wrist. So I'll give the win to the Pelagos. Now let's look at the bracelet and the clasp in the same category, because I figure if you're going to get the watch on a bracelet, you're going to get the clasp anyway. So the Sinn U50 comes on an H-link bracelet that is very well constructed with hex screws and is very loved by collectors. It only tapers though from 20 to 18, so it doesn't taper very much, which could affect comfort. And it also has a very poor clasp. So I've talked about it many times. I'm not going to go into detail, but basically, it's a press clasp with a milled blade in it, a deployment arm, but it's a press clasp and there is no micro adjust. So, get with it, Sinn. We need a better clasp for 2022. Now, the Tudor Pelagos LHD, on the other hand, has an oyster-style bracelet that tapers from 22 millimeter to 18. I think so. A bigger taper. I think it's very good looking. It's maybe better looking. Some people have complained that it has quite sharp edges that could dig a little bit into your wrist, but I didn't really feel that when I tried it. It does have, obviously, a very great clasp. Many people say this is the best clasp ever designed. A lot of micro adjust. Actually, I would tend to slightly disagree on that. I think it is not as cool as it seems, because if you use it on the floating position, then basically the watch will always be tight on your wrist. You can't really set it loose. But anyway, it's a much better clasp than the Sinn overall. And on top of that, it also comes with the rubber strap included. So I'll give the win to the Pelagos LHD. So now let's look at the dial, the bezel, and the lume. First, let's start with the dial. So the U50 has a matte black printed dial with a date that is pretty well integrated, and then those Minecraft hands. Love them or hate them. For me, I love them, so I'm fine with it, but it's basically just a printed dial, so pretty simple. On the other hand, the LHD has a matte black dial with applied indices, and it also has a raised rehaut with applied indices that are partly nested in the rehaut, and this is quite cool. Then it also has that roulette date with the alternate black and red dates, and I think if you're going to have a date window, I don't usually like date windows, but if you're going to have one, at least this one is cool. So for the dial, I think the LHD has a more involved, more expensive looking dial, even though it's a tool watch. So I'll give the win to the LHD on that. Now let's look at the bezel. So the bezel on the U50, it's black hot coating on top of a tegmented bezel. So it's a metallic bezel made of steel, and it has a lume pip. It's a captive bezel like Breitling. So there are 3 screws to keep the bezel in place, so you cannot pop it. But the thing is that it has quite, to me at least, a poor feel and sound. It's not bad by any means, but it's more like a thump, thump, thump when you turn it. And it's not really satisfying, at least not for what I expect from a bezel. On the other hand, the LHD has a matte black ceramic bezel that looks really cool. It is fully lumed and it has a great feel and sound. To me, this is the best bezel that I've ever tried. Better than the 50 Fathom, possibly better than the Submariner, or at least it's up there. It is one of the best bezel. I think if I got the LHD, I would just turn that bezel just to listen to it. It has a clicky, smooth sound. Love it. So for the bezel, I obviously have to give it to the LHD. And since we talked about the Lume bezel, let's talk about the Lume now. So overall, the U50 has quite poor Lume, let's say. It's not very bright, but it lasts a long time. A lot of people have said that it's not very potent, but it's very persistent and constant. So you can wake up at 5 in the morning and you can still read the time. However, that's not something I'm ever gonna need to do, I think. So I don't really see the advantage. I would rather have a much more potent Lume, even if it doesn't last as long. That's just a personal preference. On the other hand, the LHD has amazing Lume. I mean, it's like Blancpain 50 Fathom good Lume. It's very it's very potent. So I can't say whether it lasts as long as the U50, but I just prefer the Lume. It also, I think they use BGW9 or something similar. It's a blue Lume. I really like the Lume on it. So again, I have to give the win to the LHD for the Lume. Let's talk about the crystal quickly, and specifically about the AR coating. So they're both using, sapphire crystal, obviously, but it's different in terms of AR coating. So the Sinn U50 has AR coating both on the underside and on the outside, and it's really, really good AR coating. I mean, sometimes you look at it and it looks like there's no crystal. So it is really good, I have to say. However, I've seen plenty of reviews or accounts online saying that it's very easy to scratch. And a lot of U50s for sale, pre-owned ones, have scratched AR coating. And that's something I hate, because to me that defeats the purpose of having a sapphire crystal if you have AR coating that scratches easily on top. On the other hand, the LHD has sapphire crystal with AR coating only on the underside, from what I understand. There's no coating on the outside, and I prefer that. So for the AR coating, I give the win to the LHD again. Now let's talk about the movement inside. So the U50 comes with the Sellita SW300, which is a good movement. It's an improvement over the SW200 that's in the U1. So it's good, and it has recently been improved. It used to come with 42-hour power reserve, and since last year, Sinn is actually using the latest version with 56-hour power reserve. And you don't see that a lot. Not many people talk about it or know about it. And Sinn does not specifically say anything about the power reserve on their website, but it's been confirmed that they now have 56-hour power reserve. So they use top grade. They don't use the chronometer grade because they don't send them to COSC. They're not COSC certified, but they use top grade, and Sinn regulates the movement very, very well. So they run very well. They run within chronometer spec. It's just that they don't get COSC certified. Now, on the other hand, the LHD is using the Kinesis/in-house movement with 70-hour power reserve. So now I've heard people saying that actually they can get 72 hours of power reserve out of it, but because of marketing, that's Rolex territory, they cannot say it's a 72-hour power reserve. So it's a 70-hour power reserve. This is an in-house movement, with silicone hairspring and a full balance bridge. So it's a really good tool movement that is COSC certified. It's very accurate, and it's very convenient to have that 70-hour power reserve. Since I bought my Spitfire, I find that, if I don't wear it over the weekend, I pick it up on Monday and it still runs. And so if I'm going to work from home, I may not wear it every day. If I pick it up 2 days later, it still runs. That's great. So for the movement, again, I'm going to give the win to the LHD here. Now let's talk about overall comfort and wearability, and I think this is where things are less clear-cut. So the Sinn U50, is smaller, it's 41 mil, it's 47 lug to lug, it's only 11.15 millimeter thin, so it wears very well. I've tried it several times, it hugs my wrist very well, but of course it wasn't sized, and it is possibly a heavier watch than the LHD, and it doesn't have the micro adjust, so I'm not 100% certain that I could get it to fit perfectly for my wrist. On the other hand, the LHD obviously is bigger, is 42, is much thicker, is 14.3, but it is probably lighter when it's adjusted to my wrist, and it has that amazing adjustable clasp. So possibly it's gonna be easier to actually fit well on my wrist and lighter. So in the end, I think this is something I could only answer after a long-term use. Is it better to have a smaller, heavier, possibly less well-fitting watch, or a bigger, chunkier, lighter, but well-adjusted one? So I can't really tell by just trying them in the store, and I don't have a clear winner for that one. And finally, let's look at the last category, which is price and value retention or resale, and also warranty. So the Sinn U50 comes in at $3,110 US new at retail, whereas the LHD comes in at $4,725 US new at retail. So of course you're gonna say, well, the LHD is much more expensive. They're not really in the same category. But the thing is, about a year ago, you could get both of them at the same price, around $3,000, at least in Hong Kong. Why? Because the Sinn U50 at the time was still pretty new. I think it came out late 2020, and in 2021, you actually had to get on a waiting list at the AD to get it, because it's a very popular watch for Sinn, and you had to pay full retail price, so a little over $3,000. The LHD, on the other hand, was really not the most popular watch for Tudor, and it was before things got even worse now with Rolex and even Tudor now kind of exploding in price. So you could actually get an LHD brand new at a great dealer for $3,000. So this is why at the time already I was kind of looking at both of them, because I could get them for the same price. Now, if you look, of course, on Chrono24, or if you look around, you're gonna find the Sinn U50 for between $2,500 to $3,100, which is pretty close to the retail price. And if you order it at an AD, at least in Hong Kong, now it's easier to get. You can get between 12% to 20% off, depending on which version you get and whether they have it in store, they need to order it, etc., etc. So let's say you're gonna pay on average maybe around $2,800. So it has very good value retention for a Sinn, and usually Sinn hold their value pretty well. Now, if you look at the LHD, there are 31 models at the time of recording on Chrono24, and they go between $3,500 to up to $7,000. I memean, that's crazy. Out of 31 items or watches, there are 12 of them that are already over retail. So, I don't know where Tudor is going with this. Given that the LHD is actually a numbered edition, it is not limited, it is just numbered, but it is possible that they're going to discontinue it soon. So who knows? Maybe it's going to go up and up and up. And, in the long term, it's going to be the one that's going to hold value or even increase in value even more. But I don't know for sure for now. Now, in terms of warranty, you have 2 years with the U50 and you have 5 years with the Tudor. So, both are very well made and very well engineered. So you could say that, the win goes to Tudor here. Possibly. I'm not so sure, because I don't see any problems happening with the Sinn, even if it's a 2-year warranty. To me, there's no clear winner here, because I'm not buying the watch just for investment, or not for investment at all, actually. But, it's nice if they hold their value at least, and I think both the Sinn and the Tudor will hold their value. So I think, to me, it's a tie. Possibly for you, Tudor wins this one. So in conclusion, to recap, we had 12 categories. Sinn won 2 of them, the LHD won 8 of them, and then 2 of them were a tie. So it's a very clear win for the LHD, at least on paper. I thought I was pretty set on the U50, but I have to say objectively, I'm kind of leaning toward the LHD now. So I said before in a previous video that in 2022, I wanted to try new materials. My Spitfire is in bronze, and I thought 2022 I'm going to look at titanium and ceramic. So this is why I'm kind of leaning toward the LHD, I think. But I think if the U50 had a better clasp, possibly the Sinn would actually be a better buy. So I'm wondering whether, is the LHD or the Pelagos in general still a good choice in 2022? The thing is, should I just get the U50 now and wait maybe for Tudor to release maybe a smaller, slightly thinner Pelagos, not the FXD, but a new version of the Pelagos? Or should I just get the Pelagos now while they still make it before they discontinue it, especially the LHD, and just wait for Sinn to release a U50 with a new clasp? I wonder, which one is a better buy now. Now, there's also, of course, the Black Bay Pro. I haven't talked about it. This is also a possibility, but given that it's 14.6, it's even thicker actually than the LHD while being 39 instead of 42. It might actually wear even chunkier on the wrist. So, I want to look at that one as well, but I don't want to play the games, the 80 games, get on a waiting list or, make other purchases in order to get it. I've even read that the Black Bay Pro now might be an allocation piece that, you can only get if you buy other watches, and then you'll have to pay it in full when ordering it, even before trying it on. I mean, that's crazy. I don't want to play that game. So still considering probably the Pelagos versus U50. So let me know what you think. What do you think of those? Is there a clear winner for you? And which one do you think is worth getting first? Thanks for watching. As usual, subscribe for more. Don't forget to ask yourself what makes you tick, and I'll see you in the next one.